Hey guys, I hope you're all doing well and you've had a nice couple of weeks. For today's video, I want to talk to you about 5 of the most shocking endings in books that I've read. I'm a really big fan of endings, especially ones that are a bit of a shock or a twist or something you don't see coming. Yeah, that's my favourite kind of ending, so I tend to gravitate towards books that might have a bit of a twist in them. Not all of the ones I'm mentioning have any kind of a twist, they're just shocking for one reason or another. First up, we've got one of my favourite UK YA books, which is Undone by Kat Clarke. I'm sure most of you have probably already read it because it was absolutely huge when it came out last year. But just in case any of you haven't, I totally recommend this. It's an absolutely incredible book, a really great read, and I totally recommend it. Next up is a novel that I've talked about quite a few times, but it doesn't seem like it's been that widely read, so I try to kind of plug it as often as possible, and that is Undiscovered Girl by Alison Burnett. It's about a girl who doesn't really know what she wants to do with her life. She's just finished high school. A lot of her friends have gone off to university, but she decides to spend the summer kind of finding herself and going on a sort of journey of discovery. She's a bit of a badass. She's kind of referred to a lot in summaries as like an 18-year-old Lolita. She's sleeping with a college professor and she drinks heavily and she makes quite bad decisions, but she's very entertaining to read about. And she decides to start a blog. Which is quite interesting because then part of the novel is told through a standard narrative and then some of it is told through her blog posts and the comments. And as the novel goes on, her life starts to get more complicated, more and more things are revealed about her life, and it all builds to quite a shocking climax that I'm not going to talk about because this is the book that has shocked me most ever, I think. I just couldn't believe it when I got to the ending, and I'm still not quite over it, and I read it about 5 years ago. So if you ever hear me talking about some of my favourite books, this usually crops up amongst them. It's not a book that you'll forget in a hurry. So if you're looking for something a bit different that hasn't been so widely read, then I really recommend this one. Third, we've got a book that I'm continually championing, despite the fact it didn't get great reviews when it was released. It's Choker by Elizabeth Woods. It's about a girl who moved away from her town, her high school, and her best friend. And ever since, she's been a bit of a loner. She doesn't really feel like she fits in. And then one day, her best friend arrives on her doorstep and she's run away from home and something terrible happened to her. So our protagonist offers to kind of take her in and hide her and give her a place to stay for a little while she gets herself back on her feet. But after her best friend arrives, strange things start happening, a few people go missing, and everything starts to get a bit dark. And as the story kind of unfolds, it builds to the most amazing ending. And I never saw it coming. Lots of people in their reviews say that they guessed it right from the beginning and they knew what the end was going to be. I had no idea, and I actually think I'm quite good at figuring things like this out, but it completely caught me off guard, and I'm always going to love this book. I'm always going to be a big fan of it. Last of all is something a little bit different. As you know, I read mostly YA, but I also read quite a lot of horror, so I decided to go for a horror for my last book. It's called Come Closer, and it's by Sarah Gran, and it's an interesting one because there's a lot of ways you can look at it. It kind of focuses a bit on demonic possession, but it could cross over into mental illness, and it's quite psychological. It's kind of up to you to decide if there are supernatural things happening or if there are psychological things happening, and you're never quite sure whether everything's in her head or if it's happening for real. And yeah, it's just the story of what happens to someone when they might be being taken over by a demon, but you're never sure whether it's really happening or not. And it's got a bit of a shocker at the end. I love this book. Even though I know exactly what happens, I still find myself rereading it fairly often, which is quite rare for a horror. I don't tend to reread them very much at all, really, because I find with a horror, once you know the ending and you know kind of the villain, they don't have quite the same effect. But this one definitely stays just as interesting however many times you've read it. There's a few other books that I wanted to mention in this video, like The Bunker Diary by Kevin Brooks and Brother Sister by Sean Olin, but I know I've talked about them quite a few times in other videos, so I thought I would just try and talk about books I haven't mentioned before. So there we go, those are some of my favourite ending in books. If you hadn't guessed, I do like a twist or a shock, something to keep me on my toes and twist everything on its head just when I think everything's finished and resolved. What are your top endings in books? Let me know, and if you've read any of these four or the other two I mentioned, do let me know what you thought of them. Okay, so I'll be back in a couple of weeks with another video for you guys. Okay, bye!